Next, from the state capitol, on December 3rd, the legislature met in a special session to address the state's troubled pension systems. Illinois pensions were underfunded by an estimated $100 billion, and this was costing the state about $5 million a day in interest. The following is a portion of the testimony before the Pension Conference Cmte, in which union representatives offer their objections to the proposed pension reforms. This runs about 30 minutes.
Of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and here on behalf of the We Are One coalition of unions representing hundreds of thousands of public workers in Illinois. I do want to take exception to one thing that was just commented by Mr. Feiner. I mean, we feel we've worked very hard to pass pension reform and engage in that process genuinely, sincerely. I think like everyone here, we believe very firmly that there are problems that need to be solved, and it's in all of our interest as a state to solve them. I am having deja vu. It seems like just a few days ago that I was here sitting before a panel very similar to this one, and I told you then that it was, well, just after 9 o'clock. The school bell has rung a few minutes ago, and many of our 100,000 members are about to start their day teaching students and serving their community. I told you that our members contributed more than 9% from each paycheck, and that 80% of them don't receive Social Security. And I told you that if their contributions had been in a 401k, or if their pension benefits were cut, they would have no safety net. And I told you that despite all of this, we were willing to sacrifice more. And we did when we negotiated SB 2404, which cut benefits and would have saved the state nearly $140 billion. That wasn't enough for some reason, and it was never called for a vote in the House. But something else feels familiar today, and I'm having flashbacks to the House's SB 1. After months of conference committee meetings, the so-called compromise bill that you consider today is nearly identical to where you started, a bill twice rejected by the Senate. Despite attempts to quickly sell this as fair, make no mistake, the bill doesn't contain a cost of living adjustment and will not keep up with inflation. The cuts are so deep that in 20 years, an average teacher could see the value of her pension decrease by more than 50%. How can you do this to the good people who serve our state? There's only one way to describe that kind of blatant taking of one's life savings. We call it theft. There's no victory in a public policy that will not work, no victory in a bill that will get tied up in court, no victory in harming the lives of teachers and firefighters and nurses to a far greater degree than is just and necessary. Perhaps no one wants a solution more than we do, and that's why we're so strongly opposed to this bill. We feel it's blatantly unconstitutional, and so claiming it saves $160 billion is a disturbing illusion. It will save no money at all. It's the wrong way to handle public policy, the wrong way to treat taxpayers, and it only makes one thing certain, that we'll be back here again after seeing this bill get struck down by the courts in about a year, having deja vu all over again. There is a way out, but this bill isn't it. So on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of working people, we urge a no vote, and I thank you. And let me introduce Ted Street of the Illinois FOP.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. I'm here proudly representing thousands of working men and women on behalf of the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police this morning, and the hundreds of thousands of participants and affiliates in the We Are One. The leader's plan is not a compromise at all. It's a repackaging of the former Senate Bill 1. The former Senate Bill 1 featured almost the exact same COLA formula, COLA holidays, retirement age increases, and pensionable salary caps. Based on reports, the leader's plan is virtually the same bill. It contains all the cuts, plus expanded reliance on inefficient 401ks that undermine defined benefit plans. The leader's plan makes it impossible for retirees to keep up with the rising cost of living in retirement. It unconstitutionally slashes COLAs by using a destructive formula and imposing COLA holidays up to 5 years. Combined, these two COLA cuts erode the value of a person's pension by nearly 1/3 after 20 years in retirement, and deprive retirees of thousands of dollars of income in just the next 5 years. This is an extremely deep COLA cut. The Leaders Plan proposes hiking retirement ages up to 5 years. There's no consideration for employees with physically demanding or high-risk professions, such as police, first responders, corrections officers, nurses, and others. Retirement age increases effectively produce a benefit loss of 6% for each year increased. For example, younger workers lose 30% of their pension value without accounting for any other cuts. This plan caps pensionable salary, creating a disincentive for hiring and recruiting in critical public professions, particularly those that require advanced degrees, which is often a more cost-effective practice than contracting out for expensive specialized services. Lastly, the cap ignores the mandatory overtime required of many employees, especially those physically demanding and high-risk jobs. This funding guarantee is not ironclad. It's so weak, it could lead to state underfunding all over again. The legislature could simply vote a simple majority to change the state's required payment and totally circumvent the guarantee. This does not correct the overriding problem of state underfunding. In closing, the collective bargaining exemption under this legislation denies hundreds of thousands of workers access to democratic representational rights. And on behalf of the hardworking men and women of Illinois, this is unfair and unconstitutional. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Griffin. I'm an elementary school teacher, 30-year veteran from Schaumburg. I'm the Vice President of the Illinois Education Association. I am here today on behalf of our President, Cinda Klickna, and more than 130,000 IEA members throughout our state. As a teacher, I participate in the teacher retirement system. It's important to remember that no one in TRS gets Social Security credit for their work as a teacher, and that is true for nearly 4 out of 5 participants in the state systems. The pension is the entire life savings for most of these employees and retirees. All employers, public and private, are required to pay 6.2% toward the cost of Social Security for every employee. Therefore, every employee not in Social Security saves the state 6.2%. Senate Bill 1 blows that arrangement up. TRS has analyzed this bill, and the experts are clear. This new version of Senate Bill 1 cuts benefits so drastically that currently exempt employees will end up in Social Security. And that means the state will need to come up with 6.2% contributions for every employee forced into Social Security. So how will we pay for this? By further increasing tuition to our colleges and universities? By cutting crucial education programs like early childhood education? By laying off teachers, increasing class sizes? By giving our teachers even fewer resources with which to try to meet the needs of our students? The money will have to be paid. And if the state doesn't want to pay it, the local school districts will be sent the bill. And they'll be looking to the homeowners who are already victims of our state's unfair and inequitable education funding system. There is plenty of reason to believe that this proposed legislation is simply a backdoor cost shift from the state to local districts. Local homeowners in every part of Illinois have had enough. Meanwhile, throughout the state, children don't have nearly what they need or deserve. This is a bad bill for schools, teachers, and our children. There is a fair and constitutional pension solution available. Give Senate Bill 2404 an up or down House vote. For the good of all, reject Senate Bill 1. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Conference Committee. I am John Stevens with the law firm Freeborn and Peters here on behalf of the We Are One Coalition. I have to say that while my expectations were admittedly low that the Conference Committee could come up with a solution to the state's budget and fiscal problems within the confines of the Constitution, I am truly shocked that this body seems to have determined that the Illinois Constitution no longer matters. We've heard a number of witnesses, both pro and against this bill, talk about this bill as being unconstitutional. What do they mean? They mean that the 1970 Constitution established pensions with any public body as an enforceable contractual right, the benefits of which shall not be diminished or impaired. What we see, that means two things to you and to me. For one, it means that every member of the retirement system is entitled to the benefits in place on the day they started working for the system. The Constitution gives them an enforceable right to go to court to uphold that obligation. What does this mean for the legislative members here? It means the Constitution is a limit on how far and what you can do to change public employee pensions without the agreement, offer acceptance and consideration, standard contract principles to change the pension benefits. It's beyond doubt that aspects of the Conference Committee report on Senate Bill 1 adversely affect change benefits, impair benefits. There is no consideration, there is no offer acceptance, there is no indication that anyone affected by this agrees to these changes. Therefore, we're left with a matter of unconstitutional changes to protected benefits. What are the consequences of your actions if you move ahead with this bill? We know that the legislature intends to take up to $1.8 billion in savings out of next year's budget based on the savings generated 30 years out in this bill. It seems odd to me that we would take a pension system that's truly underfunded and say we're going to use this effort to reduce the amount of money the state puts in, but that is exactly what we're being told. The second thing we're being told is that employees need to work longer. Well, what is the consideration? If we go back to the debates of the Constitution, we see that the delegates clearly articulated the fact that one thing the legislature cannot do is tell someone you have to work longer for the same benefit. Here we're telling people you have to work longer for a lesser benefit. I don't know where the courts will come out, only the Supreme Court can, but I can tell you the unintended consequences here is one, the budget will be in worse shape next year. If the court rules against us, the systems will be in that much rules against this bill. We will be in that much deeper trouble in terms of finances. We'll have reduced the amount of money going into the pensions, but not effectively cut benefits. The second unintended consequence is this bill treats active employees much differently than retired employees. It's not a wild guess to say that employees who have the option to retire, to avoid the COLA delays, to avoid the salary or the pensionable salary cap and to avoid the age increases will retire between now and the effective date of this bill. If the courts rule this bill unconstitutional, those employees are still gone. They will now be off the active payroll, meaning fewer people will be paying into the pension systems. There'll be more retirees, meaning more people will be taking from the retirement systems, and you'll have done this state a disservice by acting in an unconstitutional manner. I urge you to reject this report and come back to Senate Bill 2404, which provides meaningful and constitutional reform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Becky Strahowski. I am the president of Teamsters Local 700. I am also a Central Region Vice President with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I have proudly been a Teamster for 2 decades, and I am an Illinois attorney for the past 13 years. Local 700 represents more than 13,000 public service employees who live and work in Illinois, in Cook County, in Lake County, in Will County, in the city of Chicago, and in municipalities across the state. I appear before you today to stand in solidarity with the other public sector unions to stop the attack on public sector pensions. Our members have always made their contributions. They deserve the pension benefits that they have earned. The unfunded pension liability facing our state should not be balanced on the backs of these workers. These workers respond to emergencies. They're there to serve and protect our families. They maintain our roads. They keep our airports running. They pick up our garbage and they plow our snow. They secure our jails. They work in our court systems. They dispatch 911 calls. And they perform essential public services for municipalities across the state. What goes unnoticed is often the high-risk nature of these jobs. Our members put themselves in harm's way and sometimes suffer on-the-job injuries and fatalities. But despite this, these workers serve with dedication, and we're proud of the public service that our members provide to Illinois. The Teamsters oppose any attempt to prevent public employees from collectively bargaining for pension benefits, for health care, for better wages. The Teamsters will fight to stop the reduction of pension benefits and defend the promises that were made to our members. Promises of modest retirement benefits. It is time to find solutions to properly fund the Illinois pension systems without punishing workers who have earned their benefit. And we understand this is a difficult and complex problem. We stand ready and willing to work together to come up with a solution that will protect the integrity of the pension systems in a way that is fair to workers. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you. There are three members who sought recognition to ask questions for now. We'll start with Senator Biss, then we'll go to Representative Zaleski, Senator Murphy, and then Representative Neckwitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is directed at Mr. Montgomery, if it would be possible for you to come to the table.
Yes, sir, Senator.
Thank you so much for being here. And I want to say up front that I agree with significant portions of your testimony, particularly your statements regarding the We Are One Coalition's willingness to negotiate and sacrifice, which I continue to believe is important and significant and laudable, regardless of where I stood on the outcome of that negotiation or the outcome of the conference committee's work.
Appreciate that.
My question regards this assertion that you made, which I've now heard numerous times in the last few days, regarding 50% cut over 20 years. Could you explain the arithmetic behind that, please?
Yeah, we did a calculation of, we actually took a number higher than the average teacher pension, I think about $50,000 as a pension, compared that under this proposed adjustment scheme under the conference committee report to the current 3% compounded COLA, which is, over the last 30 years, actually that 3% actually is less than cost of living overall. In any event, you compare those two numbers and it reduces the buying power or the value of that pension by about 48%, a little bit more than 48%.
So that's not possible. A 3% compounded increase doubles your pension in about 23 years. So that means that the impact of eliminating the annual increase altogether would eliminate 50% of the buying power over 23 years, which means over 20 years, if we were to eliminate the annual increase altogether, it would decrease the buying it would decrease the pension by something like 44%. But this bill doesn't eliminate the increase altogether, and as you've often argued, the average TRS pension now is what, roughly?
I think it's about 44, 46.
So it's let's say $46,000. The average year's service of a retiree, I believe, is 26, 27 years. So if you compare the $44,000, $45,000, $46,000 pension to the $26,000 that are immune from the cut, what you find is that the cut is affecting far, far less than half of the COLA. So now, instead of over 20 years reducing the pension by 44%, you're reducing the pension by far less than half of that, so let's say a little bit under 20%. And that's a tough thing. That shouldn't be easy to swallow, and one could justify a no vote on that, but it's very, very different than saying 50%. And I find it, I've heard this, there's obviously a lot of communication with members, robocalls went out. I've heard this number stated many times, and I've gone over the numbers every way I know how, and I just can't get to a number that's anywhere close to that 50% that you've cited.
Well, but far be it from me to challenge your mathematical expertise. But two things. One, I mean, we can certainly sit down and look at our tables together, and you can correct us if we're wrong. But I think a couple of things are certain. As you just said, it's at least a 20% reduction. We believe in that instance it's higher, but we will look at it and correct our statements if it's wrong. And of course, I'm sure you would agree that the longer you live, that was based on 20 years in retirement, the longer you live, the more you lose. And so we stand by our assertions that it's still unconstitutional. It's still a significant taking and diminution of already paid for benefits.
And I understand and I appreciate this is a difficult issue and a difficult thing to ask members to accept. I just think that making sure we're totally clear on the numbers is important, given how emotional and difficult and painful this issue is for so many of our constituents and your members.
I agree with that. And, you know, we had the bill yesterday.
Understand. Representative Zaleski.
Dan, I wanted to mention something too, based on your testimony. You mentioned the Senate Bill 2404 savings number was, I think in your words, $140 billion.
Close to it.
My understanding, based on what's been given to me, is that under the best case scenario, that bill scores out to about $57 billion in savings. Can you sort of explain the difference there?
Yeah, that was on the pension side, in pure pension savings, if you will, factoring in, because if you remember, health care was incorporated in that bill as part of consideration, and people could opt for various choices that would have eliminated their health care access as a possibility. And if you include the health care savings, we came up to, I think it was about $135 billion.
But that savings number also, that the healthcare portion of that savings would have already been taken into account based on the actions that the General Assembly took with respect to retiree health care a few years ago. So we would have already managed that health care piece in the legislation we did in, I believe, 2011, which my understanding is takes that health care piece out of the savings number.
I don't believe that's accurate. But
Okay.
again, we can have a sidebar and look at those numbers, but those were based on both a combination of actuarial figures and calculations done with numbers from the state, provided by the state.
I want to talk a little bit about the pieces of the bill that we think bolster the constitutionality. Isn't it fair to say that there is going to be a mechanism in the law that allows a working person to go into circuit court and ensure that the General Assembly honors its commitment to your members, which up until now you don't have? Is that a fair characterization, that you're gaining a right under this bill that you otherwise would not have?
I don't agree. Representative, you're talking about the funding guarantee?
Correct.
In my view, the funding guarantee is no different than what we have today. The ramp that was set up in '95 requires the retirement systems to certify an amount, and that amount must be paid. If it's not paid, it's backed up by a continuing appropriation. That is, if you don't appropriate the money, it flows to the retirement systems anyway. The game in the past has been the legislature changes the certified amount. Instead of the required contribution, you take that required contribution, cut it by whatever amount you're going to cut it, and recertify the new amount, and that's what gets paid, and that's what's backed up by the continuing appropriation. This new bill doesn't change that scenario. The legislature, by a simple majority, can change the certified amount. That's all the systems are entitled to. The only people who have a right to bring an action, as I looked at the bill very quickly in the last 24 hours, are the retirement systems and not the individuals. So the funding guarantee really doesn't give the members any solace whatsoever. It's
So-
what we have today, and it's what got us into today's problem.
So if we were to 1 year not make the payments or do something that was contrary to what's in the statute, and a system were to go into court and compel us to do that, you would argue that that right already exists within the law?
I don't think we'd get there because the certified amount is transferred by operation of law pursuant to the continuing appropriation. So what happens next time? The continuing appropriation is still valid. The only thing I can see is that the retirement systems somehow are unable to collect through the comptroller's office through the continuing appropriation, and that would allow the system to go into court. But it's a really narrow window of opportunity for the systems to walk through. I don't think it's meaningful reform.
You mentioned the offer and acceptance and consideration, and as you know, we're decreasing the contributions for active employees. Is there any belief amongst you or yours that that's a good faith offer and consideration, that if we're going to change or alter the agreement up until this point, that at the least we're going to reduce the contribution put forth into the system by your members?
If I might respond, Representative. For example, in your system, the General Assembly retirement system, the 1% that's being reduced from your contribution is the 1% that legislators have been paying since 1967 towards the cost of their annual increase, the COLA we're talking about. So you've been paying 1% of your salary all along your career for your COLA. Now you're not going to pay that 1% anymore, but guess what? You're not going to get your COLA either. So my question is, if you're reducing the amount of money that people, if you want to pay for a COLA you're not going to get, will you get a refund of the amounts you paid for that COLA that you're now not going to receive? I don't see it in the bill.
Yeah, but John, I'm going to get an adjustment, a COLA, an annuity adjustment. It's just not going to be based on a 3% compound on my annuity. It's going to be based on a new formula and index. I don't agree with the premise that we're eliminating the COLA. We're simply changing the way it's calculated.
You're not getting what you pay for. For the past years, you've been paying 1% of your salary for a 3% compounded COLA. You're not going to have to pay that 1% anymore, but you're not getting your 3% compounded COLA. That was my only point.
And the supplemental contributions when the bonds expire, that again, I would just ask you to, ask your opinion on whether you feel that, again, we've heard from We Are One, and it's a good point, Dan, that we're doing this to retirees and we're doing this to active workers, and we're not taking into consideration that there needs to be a redirection of resources into these pension funds to shore them up. Well, what we're doing is we're adding money into these systems when that debt service expires and reducing that unfunded liability to ensure the generational stability of the pensions. Is there any belief from We Are One or yourself that that's sort of helpful to what we're trying to accomplish to assure the retirement stability of your members?
Yeah, it's a good thing, and we don't see it as certainly consideration for the cuts and benefits, but it is a good thing, and it was part of 2404, and actually to a greater degree, I think I might be wrong about this, but I believe it was Representative Fortner who initially articulated that as an idea, and it was picked up by a number of people, and it went into 2404. We do think it is a good thing.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.